You are now listening to the Select Gaming Podcast.
So, good Sir Falstaff, you recently, I guess in the past couple months, you became a Nintendo Switch owner. And this was something that we were kind of both on the fence for a while. We've pretty much always stayed in a realm of like the PlayStation and the Xbox sort of world. But you made the jump because I know you got a pretty sweet deal. And I think it's like you've had it for, I would say, what, 6 months now?
Probably. I bought it when the Tears of the Kingdom special edition OLED Switch came out. As is my habit as a patient gamer, I wait into the 60th year of a console's life cycle in order to, just want to make sure all the bugs are, crushed. And when I get a hold of it, and my, the primary interest was, number one, I thought the console looked great, even though I'm not the biggest Zelda fan. And number two is I wanted it primarily to have something to play on my longer commutes that I knew I was going to be having in the fall. And for those purposes, the Switch has been great because I finally have come to treating it like the hybrid console that it was. For a period of time. I left it in the dock, and I'd occasionally play some of the big hits. But finally, actually taking it on the train has made it has helped me realize that actually there is utility in having the Switch as my second console. But I have some opinions about the Switch. I think it's a terrible piece of industrial design. The one thing that I think is really, there's a couple things that I think are really great about it. The screen on the OLED Switch is great. It's legitimately great. It's giving me PS Vita vibes, but bigger and better. And yes, the when you slide those Joy-Cons into the screen and you hear that click, yeah, that's a great sound. 10 out of 10 sound. Would recommend it. There's a whole bunch of things that people don't talk about the Nintendo Switch's design. There's the obvious one, which is that there's no D-pad. It's just on the left Joy-Con. It's just 4 buttons that substitute as directional buttons, and those are miserable when you're playing 2-dimensional games. But what has sort of cropped up around the Nintendo Switch is a whole cottage industry of plastic waste. And I don't even mean this from an environmental perspective, although, you're welcome to think that way too. But a whole industry that is purely designed to ameliorate the fact that the Nintendo Switch in handheld mode is one of the most ungodly, uncomfortable consoles to use. And what people use instead are all types of like console sleds where you push the screen of the OLED Switch into what's basically the PlayStation Portal. There's bigger Joy-Cons. There's console grips where you're basically shoving your console into a 3D printed table or handles, and all of this crap, all of it is because Nintendo didn't design something that is good to feel in the hands. And what the Switch has made me ask myself is, when we were younger and we had a Game Boys, or we had Game Boy Colors or Game Boy Advances, or in my case a Game Gear, were those things actually comfortable, or am I making things up? Because the Switch is so goddamn uncomfortable to play in its stock form, in its stock configuration, that it strikes me that we just either were kids and didn't care because the alternative was looking out the window and counting the number of light poles as we passed by in the car, or have we just or we were more tolerant or what have you of the gaming experience. But the Switch is just so goddamn uncomfortable.
So it's funny because when the Switch first came out, and let's just remind people, the Switch came out in what, 2017?
Something ridiculous like that, yeah.
Okay, so it's been out for a very long time, and you have to think about in the context of when it came out. I was seeing a ton of people playing it on the subway. I was seeing it more out in the open, right? And I think the whole thing with the Switch was like, you can play it on your TV, it's a portable system that you can bring anywhere. And that was the appeal. But I feel like the appeal of actually playing this thing outside, as much as people were in the beginning, has sort of weaned off quite a bit. And something that, when you look at something like Pokemon Go, where it's a game that, it utilizes a smartphone, a portable device. Nintendo usually is pretty good at innovating with their hardware, right? Like the Game Boy camera or all these other devices, like the Pikachu game, right, where it was something like Seaman. Like Nintendo hasn't really innovated at all with like the portability aspect of the Switch. They haven't really done anything other than the fact that they're like, well, hey guys, so we're not making any more Game Boys. We're not making any more Nintendo DSs. So we've put those two things into one, and we're moving forward in this way. So this is it. So this is the handheld that you're getting, and this is the system that you're getting. I'm not going to scold you for saying that the DS as a portable device is probably a cheap feeling / not a good device. And it's funny because so many people have been ripping on the PlayStation Portable for whatever reasons, but it's like a lot of people saying that they're saying that it feels good.
Oh, you mean
they're saying that it's
the PlayStation Portal, the one for the streaming from the console, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I know it's just strictly like a streaming device that it's like if someone's, watching a movie and you want to play on the TV, you can't, or you want to play in bed, your PS5. People are saying it's like the screen is good. They're saying that it's a good feeling handheld device. It's unfortunate that it's strictly a streaming thing because maybe there'd be more potential, but I mean, I haven't heard good things in general about the Nintendo Switch being a solid device that you can play as like a portable thing. And I think people have forgotten about this. Like, how does it feel as an actual portable device? You know what I mean? Not as a console. Consoles, whatever, great. They have, good games and whatnot. But as what it's offering, is it any good?
Yeah, the Switch has a lot of great games. Mainly, they're the Nintendo games, as is the tradition of Nintendo consoles. But I think it's look, like the Game Gear had the stupid magnifying glass. The Game Boy had the Game Boy Light. You know,
Yeah.
all of these experiences, all these portable experiences, are going to be a compromise in one way or the other. But it just strikes me that the Switch might be successful despite the fact that actually holding the damn thing is largely uncomfortable. And if you're at the point where you're thinking to yourself, well, should I buy a Switch? If you ask me now, should I buy a Switch or should I wait? I would say consider getting a Steam Deck, which is a far more comfortable console to hold. There's far more sales available on Steam, even though that's a kind of janky experience in its own way in terms of software. And it's probably not for, little Billy who just wants to play Mario Strikers. But if you can hold off, because it doesn't seem like the Switch 2 is that far on the horizon. But maybe you should, but I'll just say, thinking about Nintendo's recent industrial design, including the Wii U, which I found to be supremely comfortable. I just feel like the Switch is a huge mistake in terms of the portability factor. Just a couple more centimeters on either side would have made it much more comfortable for adult gamers, or maybe it's just not for me, and it's made for kids.
I think they copped out significantly on material and it was a very minimal design. Like when I look at the Switch, it kind of reminds me of like Fisher Price design. I don't know if it's as strong as Fisher Price, because I mean, Fisher Price, you can drop those toys down the stairs and they're still okay. I don't think that's the case with the Switch, but I mean, I think it's just like they copped out, and I think they copped out on the material and on the design, because I think that the appeal was for it to be this, 2-in-1 experience. But from my perspective, you bit the bullet first on getting a Switch. I mean, I was on the fence. I'm still on the fence. I think I'm going to pass on this one, and I think I'm going to wait for whatever they're offering for their next thing. But I think the biggest thing right now is that as someone who wants to get into, getting a Nintendo or like a used Switch or whatever, it's not the most approachable system as well in terms of like the price point for games. And nobody talks about that too with Nintendo. So you have Mario Odyssey that's been out for like at least 5+ years now, okay? And that game is still full price. It's still $79.99, okay? A lot of these games that have been out for a while that I would like to play, I'm looking at the price point and I'm like, I'm not paying full price for that. Where you have games like, God of War for the PlayStation 4 that, came out, talking about like the 2018 one, came out, it was like at a price point of like $79, $89. You can get that game for like $20 now. You can get Uncharted 4 for like $10 now. You can get the PS4 Spider-Man game for like $30 now. Nintendo, it's not a very approachable system. Like they don't have a history of lowering their game prices. It's kind of like, if this is what you want, this is what you're going to get. And the Switch is on its last breath, and there's no sign of any of the games going down in price. So at this point, obviously, for people who want to get into the Nintendo world, you should probably just wait, because I think there's going to be backwards compatibility with a lot of these games too.
I think that would be. I think having backwards compatibility is something that would go a long way to making Switch owners feel comfortable. Because if there's one thing that's true about Switch owners, it's like they own a lot of Switch games,
and they don't really trade them in. They keep those games, man.
Yes. So it'll go a long ways towards remedying the sort of, or easing the transition now, given that the Switch has been around like nearly 7 years at this point. But also knowing Nintendo and their desire to re-release Wii and Wii U games on the Switch, there's a real argument that they have no incentive to go backwards compatible, to sell you Super Mario Odyssey remastered on the Switch 2 would not surprise me at all.
I think if they're smart, they would have backwards compatibility for the next round. I think that would help them significantly. I mean, we really haven't had a console in a long time that made a big statement of like, hey, the games that you bought last gen, you can play on this one, right? Microsoft is doing it now, but they didn't do it too much, or they didn't advertise that too much with like the Xbox 360 or the Xbox One. I mean, now they're doing it.
Yeah, it's backwards compatibility is something that gamers really care about and parents care about for a time being, and then I feel like it sort of slips into the background as the new Pokemon game comes out. But I will say this just as a way of closing. I do enjoy my Switch. I think it's a great console. I think primarily, if it weren't for the fact that I'd be traveling, I would be playing it less. But god damn it, if these companies that are selling handhelds on AliExpress, shipping them worldwide, are able to make like these emulation handhelds, if they're able to make far more comfortable things than Nintendo, then we got problems.
That's not a good sign. Yeah, this cannot be a Mad Catz world.
No.
Right?
No.
If the original company is not making it great out of the box, that's an issue if you have to start buying third-party things. And I think that that's the lesson there.
Thank you for tuning into the Select Gaming Podcast. Like, share, and subscribe. We create videos for the Select Gaming that are guided by our personal interests, and your support makes that possible.